by Dr. Garvey, son of the Right Honorable Marcus Garvey, to St. Kitts. I want to start off by saying the first hour of the program, we will not be taking any calls. We will consider calls in the second half, and I'm asking you all, please be brief with your thoughts and your questions so that other people who are beginning to complain that they cannot get in on the lines will be able to join us if they so desire. Okay? So, my first question this morning, now where is it? Okay, is this visit by Dr. Garvey. Can you give us some background on Dr. Garvey himself and a little insight into why Marcus Messiah is so renowned?
Yes, I just first would like to, with your permission, to just wish a very pleasant good morning to all who are tuning in out there in Radio Land, both by radio and by internet. In the Roots of Enslaved Peoples Committee, we have a way of referring to each other as brothers and sisters. And so to my fellow Kittitians and Evisions, today we are all brothers and sisters, and it is in that spirit that I am participating in this interview today. In fact, that is the spirit that actually landed here when Dr. Julius Garvey, the son and heir of the Right Excellent Marcus Messiah Garvey, on Sunday, the 3rd of August. From his arrival, it has just been simply phenomenal. And when I say that this entire series of events went absolutely profoundly, tremendously, it was almost like a spiritual experience. Oh. And this isn't just to say that we are saying something of the man. We're just saying something about the mantle that he carries. And in everything that he was asked to do, he didn't complain. And for those of us who are aware, he had a very, very comprehensive program. I just want to give a little bit of an outline as to what his program was like, because I know most people, they experience the remembrance ceremony, but there was way more to his program than that. While he was here, he participated in a full heritage immersion experience on both St. Kitts and on Nevis. This was curated by our very best. If there was a PhD given for tour, being a tour operator and being able to be a guide, that is the person called Mr. Leonard Stapleton. Okay. And by the time he was finished with Dr. Garvey said, I feel like I officially have a PhD in St. Kitts and Nevisology. It was really an engaging experience. He also engaged in a youth forum whereby the Roots of Enslaved Peoples Committee partnered with the St. Kitts National Youth Parliamentary Association, the 25 Remarkable Teens for 2024, and the Elevate Youth. And we gave it to them to plan and to organize and make their own, and they did a phenomenal job. And that exchange was just simply profound. Again, everything about this visit was profound. And he also had an engagement, a talk with the inmates of His Majesty's prison as well, and a special sit-down on the invitation of the Houses of Rastafari, who held their own event at they've renamed it now to, I think it's Africa Square?
Square, yes.
Africa
it was
Square.
formerly
Victoria Square, I believe.
Yes. The one next to, right off the circus, right? Right across from the, from Bank of Nevis, yeah.
Yes, the grounds where Circus Grill Restaurant used to be.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
The park that is directly beneath that is where it was held, which is a site that also has tremendous historic value as well. And the remembrance ceremony in and of itself was designed not just in terms of us inviting him as a guest and as a speaker, but also it was a very personal experience for him too, because it's for the first time at 92 years old, he was able to be in a space, because St. Kitts is not the only country that he visited, but I think we are the ones who have designed it this way, that he was able to retrace his father's steps from the moment that he arrived in Pompey to when he gave the actual national address in the St. Kitts Mutual Improvement Society Hall, as it was called at the time. Now, Dr. Julius Garvey, for those who may not know much about him, he's the second son of Marcus Garvey. The eldest son, Marcus Garvey Jr., he passed away some years ago. I think he would have been maybe over 100 by now had he lived. Marcus Garvey died when Dr. Garvey was about 7 years old. That is what we were told in the youth forum. He is a retired thoracic and cardiovascular surgeon who practiced in New York City, but now lives with his wife in Miami. And he is also the CEO of the Garvey Institute, where he travels around the world in various capitals, in Ethiopia, all across the continent of Africa, in the Caribbean, and the United States. And he does a lot of work when it comes to promoting what he calls Black humanism, and also incorporating Garvey's teachings in terms of restorative justice and outreach towards at-risk youth. So he speaks a lot in that vein. And we were very privileged to have been introduced to him by our very own national of St. Kitts and Nevis, Mr. Simba Hanley, as he's commonly known. He himself is an educator with a master's degree in restorative justice practices, not just restorative justice itself. And it is in this vein that he made the introduction through our High Commissioner, His Excellency Samuel Berridge. And Mr. Berridge, we're very honored that Ambassador Berridge resided his confidence in us as a committee to execute this event on his behalf. Through this whole, all of the series of events that took place was by a seriously national collaborative effort. And it really shows that the spirit of Ubuntu, which is I am, because we are, is very much alive and well in our federation, despite what we may think. We partnered with the Governor General, first and foremost, Her Excellency Dame Marcella Liebert, who brought all of the series of events we're going to be having moving forward under her distinguished patronage, with this being the second activity in our program for the year. And also we partnered with the Office of the Prime Minister as well. And I have to give tremendous thanks. I can't thank him enough for Mr. Arthur Sharp, prominent businessman, and also the Honorary Consul for Jamaica to St. Kitts and Nevis, who really, really stepped forward and financed really the lion's share of the expenses that came with this event. Marcus Messiah Garvey is a legend. And from just the response that we've received from Kittitians and divisions, and all who were involved and who were present at these events, we see that Marcus Garvey may be even more revered here than he is in Jamaica.
Okay. If you say so.
No, from the responses, we're even claiming him, as our own. But he was, I consider him a prophet and a shepherd who, when he formed the Universal Negroes Improvement Association back in 1914, he ignited something within our people across 4 continents. One president, former president, I think it was Kwame Nkrumah, said that he made them even aware of their own degradation that they were not aware of before. Because at that time, almost close to 100 years after slavery was abolished, and it came into real effect really in 1838 rather than 1834, because as you're aware, we had a 4-year apprenticeship period where they were still essentially tied to the plantations under the same conditions. But despite that, over the almost 100 years after slavery, not much had really changed in terms of the conditions the black masses of the Federation, the former ex-slaves, would have been existing under. It was an oppressive system where blacks were not even able to have access to land, because at that time, all land was crown lands. And basic workers' rights, basic human rights were not adhered to as they continued to work mainly on the plantations. And the UNIA actually was formed a few years after the St. Kitts Mutual Improvement Society was formed. It was founded in the main in 1901. I think that they tried starting it, I think, in 1880, but it officially came together under about 5 charter members led by W.A.H. Seaton in 1901. And what we see when you really think about it is what is common to the MIS and the UNIA. It's that I, improvement.
Okay.
Right? So it shows that this was a spirit that was awakening among our people, I guess, out of the frustration, out of the challenges, out of the sheer weight and pressure of oppression, knowing that something has to change. We cannot continue existing like this. And so the Mutual Improvement Society on St. Kitts was started, and the Universal Negro Improvement Society was begun by Marcus Garvey. I can go on and on, but I will give Tony a chance to also give some reflections.
Well, I think you've covered, certainly you've covered the visit. We did have the opportunity to speak with somebody who had connected with us, who traveled with him, sat next to him on the plane going back to Miami, and of course knew who he was, so started a conversation, which he said was wonderful. And he said, not really knowing who this Kittitian was so open and said how much he enjoyed it. The person asked him if he agreed with his father's assessment that we were the Garden of Eden. He said absolutely. He mentioned that he also went to Nevis, which he loved as well. He did bemoan the fact that, and they both kind of agreed that, one of the things that Marcus Garvey urged our people to do was to read. He said, read. He wanted us, through knowledge, to empower ourselves. He said, the man who doesn't read will always be governed by the man who does. And he, if anybody gets the opportunity to look back at because the recordings of the presentations are still online on YouTube, and the Honorable Jacinth Henry Martin, our ambassador to the U.S., did a poem where she borrowed some of his words from his speech. Yes. His speech, by the way, is also available. It's massive, Lorraine. It's pages and pages. I don't know if I can provide it to you. I don't know if WinFM wants to find a space to put it online.
Yes, we actually took the liberty of transcribing it.
Yes.
It's about 7 pages, single-spaced.
It's quite long.
Yes, but he really goes into detail about personal character development, and he emphasized the individual responsibility. Self-reliance was definitely something that he championed, that we have to look within ourselves. The battle is within ourselves. Do not become a victim of circumstance. And I think that was the key that really unlocked our own sense as a race of agency, of being able to do what was necessary to shift our circumstances in our favor. And it's from that awakening that we saw, all of the, a lot of the, I should say, momentum being given to a lot of the resistance movements of that time, and led to ultimately the decolonization of countries in Africa, as well as the independence movement across the Caribbean region. And Yes, across the Caribbean.
And I would like to draw Dr. Gill into this as well, but I wanted to point out that he's actually, I'm now a history teacher, and he actually is part of the Caribbean history syllabus. He rose, and his UNIA rose to prominence as Neri says, at a time, sorry, Ambassador Dockery says,
okay.
at a time when you saw a rise you began to see a rise in nationalism, black nationalism in the region. When he came to St. Kitts in particular, and I think that's why he's so revered here, why decades after his visit, people still talk about it, and herald him and hold him up. It would have been a couple of years after Buckley's. Okay, so people were already dissatisfied. They understood that how it was not working and was not right. And so he vindicated them, if you will, by saying, this, we have to stand up, we have to look out for ourselves, we have to educate ourselves. So in the 1930s, we had this series of labor disturbances and unrest across the region. Yes. And this was in particular, this is why he had his tour in 1937, and he went to Trinidad and Ghana. He had previously been banned from Trinidad. But in that same year, he made these visits, and I made some notes here, and I'm sorry if I keep looking down, but I'm trying to catch all of the things I had in mind. As you mentioned, his emphasis on self-reliance, on racial pride, on the unification of African people, all of these things, they countered that colonial oppression, yes. Is that the right word?
Yes.
Yeah, the colonial oppression. Mm-hmm. This was a time in St. Kitts and Nevis, and it's one of the documents I was able to show Dr. Garvey when he was here. We had something in St. Kitts and Nevis called the Masters and Servants Act that came into place about 10 years after the end of apprenticeship. It was in place for nearly 100 years in St. Kitts and Nevis, and it's what governed the employer-employee relationship. So we're talking after enslavement. If I worked for Ambassador Dockery and I, on my day off, wanted to come and work a few hours for you, I had to get her permission. If I didn't show up to work, because we're now all working for ourselves, if I didn't show up to work, I could get fined. I could get jailed. It was a criminal offense for a worker to do these things. Now, so there were some restrictions, if you will, on the employer, but they were not criminal offenses. They might get sanctioned, they might have to forfeit some pay or something. But 100 years after emancipation, our laws on the books still kept our people down, still kept the masses down. So it was in this environment that we had this man, who was a very dramatic speaker, come and say,
the mighty race of people.
We have the power.
Yes.
And a lot of people, it's funny, I quoted something that he said, and somebody said, oh no, those are the words of Bob Marley, but a lot of people don't know that the Emancipate Yourselves from Mental Slavery, that is so famous from Bob Marley's Redemption song, those were Garvey's words, and his exact words, actually, he was speaking in Nova Scotia, we believe on his way to St. Kitts, because it was the same Lady Nelson that the ship that he departed from Nova Scotia on is the boat that he arrived at Pump Bay. Mm-hmm. So his exact words were, he wasn't telling them, he's saying, we're all going to do it. We're going to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery, because while others might free the body, none but ourselves can free the mind. Yes. And he went on to say, the mind is your only ruler. Sovereign, the man who is not able to develop and use his mind is bound to be a slave of the other man that does.
Yes, yes.
And that's the whole point, isn't it? On this conversation? Yes, anyway, that's why we love him so much. Yes. It was life-changing for our people to hear him speak. Dr. Gay, we've been monopolizing the conversation. And then okay, lovely.
Good morning, all. Okay.
Hi.
As I indicated to the ambassador, yesterday,
I'm listening.
Blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
More than 42 million cars from 19 different car companies are being recalled for faulty airbag inflators. Repairs are fast, easy, and free. The problem isn't with the airbag, it's with the airbag inflator. Because the inflator can rupture, shooting shrapnel through the airbag, which can cause serious injury or even death. Don't risk it, fix it.
Please contact TDC Automotive Division to find out if your Toyota vehicle is affected by the Takata airbag recall. Visit or call us at 465-2511 in St. Kitts or 469-5430 in Nevis.
Okay, welcome back, listeners. And right now we are going to go to Dr. Cameron Gill. As I said earlier, he's senior lecturer at the
Clarence Fitzroy Bryant College.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
You know. So,
morning.
Dr. Gill, good morning. Welcome.
Morning. Morning. Okay, well, first of all, pleasant weekend to those colleagues in the studios or the listening public. But first, I have to begin by saying that it is probably impossible to, and Ambassador Dockery, as well as Tony Frederick would have touched on this already, but it is probably impossible to overstate the impact that Marcus Garvey would have had on the forces that led to the political enfranchisement of Caribbean people.
Excuse me, Dr. Gill, you're being asked to turn up your volume a little.
Okay, hold on
Yes.
there. My volume is up. Hold on, let me check. My volume is up to 100%.
Oh, okay. All right, continue.
Okay. So as I was saying, it is as both the ambassador and Tony would have mentioned earlier, it is almost impossible to overstate the impact that Marcus Garvey would have had on the forces that led to the political enfranchisement of Caribbean people. Bear in mind that up to the 1930s, living conditions for the black and brown masses in the Caribbean, especially in English-speaking Caribbean, had barely changed since emancipation in the 1830s. And what we have to bear in mind is that this was emancipation. The law was framed under terms favorable to the former enslavers. We have to take credit in that the British were forced to end slavery, not because they wanted to, although that's the way they teach it in their syllabus in Britain today, but because they were forced to, because of increasing more frequent and widespread slave revolts. So our people forced them to end slavery. But when they did it, they framed the law in a way to be as advantageous as possible to the former enslavers. So, for example, they were given 20 million pounds in reparation for the loss of their quote-unquote property. Well, we were never compensated for the centuries of enslavement, exploitation, physical, mental, emotional, sexual abuse, etc. Then you have laws that were put in place to basically keep us servile. So yes, while legally you're now entitled to a wage, everything was done to keep you dependent
On
on
the
the
plantation
estate.
system, yes.
So, for example, you're working on an estate for very low wages. You're now paying very high rents. Sometimes, very often, the employment contract prohibited you from buying groceries from anywhere else beside the store on the estate. And obviously, with the low wage and high rent, you'd have to be in debt and would be, I would say, trusting. So this left you more and more dependent. So the frustration among the masses in the Caribbean was palpable. And then you had other regional and international events that made it worse. For example, when you had the crash of the stock market, leading to the Great Depression in the 1920s, with high unemployment in the USA, which had before been a major outlet for migration. You had increased discrimination against black men who had migrated from the Caribbean to the USA. So many of these men are now returning home into an environment where there's already a lot of poverty, high unemployment, etc. So you add into this environment of social and political and economic marginalization the teachings of Marcus Garvey, which were becoming influential throughout the black diaspora, including here in the Caribbean. It is noteworthy that when you had the 1930s revolts erupting, the first one that took place was here in St. Kitts, what is now known as the Bucky's Revolt, in January of that year when these revolts took place. So, as it was noted earlier by Tony, the people were already waking up when Marcus Garvey arrived in St. Kitts. So his teachings had an impact on St. Kitts even before he physically set foot on Kittitian soil. So it's important to note his importance, and Tony had mentioned already about him being in the syllabus. That is true. So, for example, in the Caribbean Studies syllabus, one of the topics we look at is Caribbean intellectual traditions. We examine the various intellectual traditions that have influenced us politically and socially. Capitalism, socialism, Marxism, etc. And included in that is Pan-Africanism, of which Marcus Garvey was the first major proponent, and negritude, which came out of the French Caribbean from thinkers like Amy Césaire.
Césaire,
And
yeah.
Franz Fanon.
Yeah.
If
And negritude is very similar to the Pan-Africanism that was pushed by Marcus Garvey. So we do look at Marcus Garvey's influence, etc. And his influence, for example, on another important group in Caribbean history, including St. Kitts history, which is the Rastafari movement. Because Marcus Garvey had made a prophecy about the king rising from the east. So when His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie, at his coronation in Ethiopia, many people in the Caribbean, again in an environment of social, economic, and political marginalization, so understandably, you're looking for a symbol or signal of things that will get better. So Haile Selassie's coronation was seen by many as a fulfillment of the prophecy by Marcus Garvey. I mean, we all have our religious views, whether or not you agree or not. It's not really the point to me. The point is that this Marcus Garvey's words were influential, and Haile Selassie's coronation was seen as being basically his words coming to fruition, and this had an impact on the creation of the Rastafari movement.
Yes.
In Caribbean. Most people don't even realize, many people have the mistaken view that the Rastafari faith came about in the 1960s or 50s or mid-20th century, and most people don't realize how old it is. And its founding is a direct impact of Garvey's teachings. So Garvey had a huge influence on the Caribbean, including in St. Kitts Nevis, where we had the Bucks Revolt, the first of those major labor revolts, etc.
Yes, and just to that point, Dr. Gill, even when the Union Messenger, they covered Marcus Garvey's visit, and it opens by saying that when Marcus Garvey landed, he was met by a crowd at that port in Pump Bay, and then when he gave his speech at the MIS Hall, they said there was a huge crowd standing on the outside, and on the inside was filled to the brink.
Wow,
right,
that's
and
nice.
overflowing. So as many people as could make it came to that hall that day to hear his address. So this shows the level of respect and reverence that they had already held for him by the time he got here. It wasn't like he was a relative unknown who had to be introduced to the public.
And I also wanted to add to what Dr. Gill said about that we teach about him in the CXC syllabus, even at the fifth form level at CSEC. When we look at the pressures for the internal pressures, the pressures from within the Caribbean on Britain to start giving their colonies more autonomy, and ultimately that moved to independence. Marcus Garvey, Garveyism, the UNIA, along with the trade union movement and the unrest of the 1930s, all of those we teach about as the internal pressures that ultimately led to independence. So he's very much present today in our schools. It's unfortunate that more and more, there's some schools where history is no longer even compulsory. I'm fortunate to teach at a school where it is, but by the time they get to fifth form, there are a lot of students who have sort of put it by the wayside. We're doing our best. We're doing our best.
Part of the vision behind this visit, because the Roots of Enslaved Peoples Committee is it's a UNESCO committee, and the UNESCO National Commission is under the authority of the Ministry of Education. So we have chosen to partner with the Curriculum Development Unit in the effort that is now being undertaken to curate a curriculum or develop a curriculum for the teaching of Sinkit's Nevis studies, which will be a mandatory course that is going to be taught in third form at the very least, if not third and fourth form, by the time we finish fleshing out all the different elements that we want to capture. And it will be a competencies-based course based on the CSEC, Global Citizenship Competency. And it will be mandatory in order to graduate. And so this is a moment that we're in. It's something that had been attempted in the past. The education strategy, the new education sector strategy, which I think came on stream in 2018, spoke to it. But as time has gone by, what we see happening in the world, and even with this visit, we see the necessity of giving that effort some momentum. And so I am pleased that the Ministry of Education has committed itself that we will begin the consultancy to start that work by September of this year. It's definitely a moment whose time has come, and you felt that energy at the remembrance ceremony. You felt that this was more than just a visit. You felt as if the spirit of Garvey actually came and rested right there in Pompeii. I just want to highlight that a little bit, because for me, the reason why we call it a remembrance ceremony is that as time passed, as we became independent and time passed, we have, of course, a powerful civil rights movement that allowed us to gain adult suffrage, a labor movement that allowed us to advocate for better living conditions, hours of work, all of these things. And then after independence, that labor movement gained political expression in political parties that were created. However, I would say over time, I think to some degree, our country, our nation, and even around the Caribbean region, we've kind of a little bit lost touch with our past and how far we've really come as a people, and the fact that it's not over yet. Because as much as our forebears and our national heroes fought for us to gain these rights, they're still under threat every single day. The forces of the legacy of slavery, the legacy of colonialism and systemic racism still impacting us on all levels, from economy to how we treat each other, to how we organize ourselves in the society. It's still having that effect. And so occasionally we need to take a moment to remember and to remember, what it took for us to be where we are, and to understand that we can lose it just as easily And it's something that we have to continuously fight for. And so is in remembering, which is the idea of Sankofa, go back and fetch it. In the remembrance, move forward to reclaim what is rightfully yours. Because that reclaiming is an ongoing process. You're talking about undoing 450 years of conditioning, right? It hasn't gone past 450 years since slavery was abolished, right? The transatlantic slave trade had its bicentennial in 2007. So we're not there yet. It's an ongoing daily work that we have to do, both as countries, in terms of not only how we govern ourselves, but also in terms of deepening and strengthening ties with each other, as part of this broader program of Pan-Africanism, the Caribbean integration, and then the outreach and pivot to Africa that we're now seeing. So this visit was part of creating that national conversation around the importance of our children learning their history, because if the next generation isn't aware, when Mr. Stapleton took us on those tours and he went into detail about all of these sites that you would pass normally on any given day and not even know their importance, right? Some of them are no longer standing. It could be events. It could be something like a battle that took place here, or pirates being hung on a gallows there, and all kinds of remarkable stories he was able to bring to life. If they're not passed on, they would be lost forever. If they're not documented in a text or in books, they will be lost forever. And I really have to pause here to thank Mr. Stapleton. He is going to be the lead consultant in this initiative to develop that curriculum. And he will, of course, be supported. And ultimately, that curriculum will also be peer-reviewed by a panel of national treasures themselves, who will give it that final approval before it is officially launched.
Okay.
Dr. Gill, we're going to take another break.
Yep. Oh, okay.
Okay.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib. It's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
More than 42 million cars from 19 different car companies are being recalled for faulty airbag inflators. Repairs are fast, easy, and free. The problem isn't with the airbag, it's with the airbag inflator. Because the inflator can rupture, shooting shrapnel through the airbag, which can cause serious injury or even death. Don't risk it, fix it.
Please contact TDC Automotive Division to find out if your Toyota vehicle is affected by the Takata airbag recall. Visit or call us at 465-2511 in St. Kitts or 469-5430 in Nevis.
People make the world go
Welcome back, listeners. I find that this is a very interesting history lesson, and it reminds me of sometime in the last century when I was back in school, Very informative.
Trust me, I was in school in the last century as well. It's not as bad as it sounds.
But as we move on, I would just ask, could we get a little more information about this Mutual Improvement Society exactly?
I think that one is for the ambassador. But if I could just say quickly on what she was saying about the new curriculum and why it's so important. By the way, all of the reasons you said, that's why I teach history, because somebody has got to try and keep the spark, and I hope my children have a spark. But also the CXC syllabus, which is tremendous for the detail that has been added over the years, because I was in school when it was first introduced. But also the CXC syllabus, which is tremendous for the detail that has been added over the years, because I was in school when it was first introduced. But also the CXC syllabus, which is tremendous for the detail that has been added over the years, because I was in school when it was first introduced. is as a general picture, and a lot of the examples that are used are from other, usually the larger islands, except Buckley's. Buckley's does make a mention, does get a mention in the actual textbooks. But there is so much about St. Kitts and Nevis history
Yes.
that is not part of the general story that we have at CXC. Like, a lot of people don't know, and I mean, this is something I found out since I moved back here, but Nevis was the transshipment point for enslaved people in the Leeward Islands. So in the 17th century, the Royal African Slave Trading Company, that was the company that had the monopoly at the time for Britain to be trading enslaved people. The Leeward Islands transshipment point was on Nevis, somewhere on Nevis, and I don't think anybody at this time knows the location. I guess they'd have to pore over old notes. There was an actual factory, if you will, an actual unloading point from which enslaved people were then, or I should say captives, because you're not really enslaved until you end up on an estate, I suppose, but captives were then shipped out. So that's a whole thing that, somebody, I hope one of my students will see as a master's or PhD thesis waiting to happen.
Even the fact that Pump Bay was a former port, I wasn't aware
Yeah.
of.
Yes.
Because when we initially started planning for this, we just assumed that it was Bastia Harbor. And we were already organizing our plans for the MIS visit in terms of the route we would take as starting on the Bay Road. And it was the historians who enlightened us to tell us that no, it was actually Pump Bay would have been.
Since the time of the earliest, since the time of the earliest settlement. Now remember, the British occupied the middle part, and Pump Bay is actually a little bit into what would have been the French part, Capesterre, but everybody used that port. So since the original European settlement, that was the main commercial port. And of course, at the time, Bastia was the French, Basseterre was the French capital, later became the English capital. But, Pump Bay had been doing its thing for, a couple hundred years. So it continued.
Allow me
And
to
Dr.
jump
Gill,
in
yes,
here.
he wrote his PhD thesis
yes, so-
on Pump Bay.
Okay.
Yes, go ahead,
Yeah,
Dr. Gill.
my doctoral thesis was on the historical archaeology of the port of
Oh,
San
yes,
Antonio.
this is his thing.
And,
Yes.
what made that anchorage unique is that it is the only port in the Caribbean where you had a boundary between two colonial powers actually running through the port itself. So part of the boundary between not French Capesterre and English St. Christopher ran through the northern part of Pump Bay. And that is what led to the exacerbated hostilities between the English and French, because St. Kitts was the first settlement for both England and France in the Caribbean. It was from here that they moved on to establish other colonies. So it was vitally important for this colony to succeed for both of them in terms of trying to expand their nascent empires in the region to challenge the Spanish hegemony. So that port town, Sandy Point and Port, played a major role in British and French expansion ambitions in the region.
And
Them to succeed here before they go expand. Now, allow me to continue to make another point.
John Newton, tell him about Newton too, Dr. Gill.
Yeah, hello?
Tell him about John Newton landing his cargo there as well.
Yeah, the gentleman who later claimed to have been converted to Christianity. Yes, he discussed in my dissertation as well, because a lot of his accounts of arriving in States were landing enslaved persons at Pump Bay. So that shows the importance of the port, which remained an important, very active port up until the 1970s or so. In fact, up until the sugar storage facility was erected at Boardwalk, Pump Bay remained the major port for the exportation of molasses from St. Kitts. But allow me to move on as well and discuss some other important key points that Dr. Garvey would highlight. So I thought Frederick was commenting on in terms of knowledge of local history, and so that is an issue we have in St. Kitts and Nevis with not enough knowledge about local history. So up to this week, in a conversation with a friend, and they told me that they're learning about Better Douglas. Now, as many of the general public would be aware, for the last couple of years, I've been campaigning to have both Marcus of the Woods and Better Douglas inscribed as national heroes of St. Kitts and Nevis. Now, for example, Mary Prince, a woman whose circumstance experiences were very similar to Bette Douglas's. Just like Bette, she was a literate enslaved woman who campaigned for freedom in writing. Now, Mary Prince is today a national hero of Bermuda. She's well known among Bermudans, and Mary Prince is also included in the Cape history syllabus. Bette Douglas, whose experiences were similar and achievements were similar, is still not known among many Kittians, both children and adults. And so I would argue that Bette Douglas is a national hero like Mary Prince and should be well known among Cape and CISEC history students. So we need to do a better job in terms of promoting. I support the initiative, something we've been calling for a while, to have the local history in secondary schools, but I would argue we need to go further still and start from the primary schools. So there needs to be more of our local history and heritage in our, for example, our primary school social studies syllabus. Children should be learning about Marcus Aurelius and Bette Douglas from primary school. Every child in St. Kitts will tell you who Robin Hood is, etc. Okay? But the thing is, Robin Hood was a fictional character that was created out of amalgam of some supposedly actually existing people. Okay? We all know about King Arthur, but they still dispute about whether King Arthur even existed. Okay? Marcus of the Woods and Bette Douglas were real flesh and blood persons just like us. But many Kittitians still do not know about them and their achievements, etc. So they just more local history. Coming back to the Marcus Garvey and his impact on us, etc. As I said earlier, the first of the major 1930 revolts took place in St. Kitts. And this led to a chain reaction that caused the British to finally stand up and take notice. And it was through the Moyne Commission, which is a response to the 1930 revolts, that you find trade unions became legalized. Out of that came the first political parties in St. Kitts, Nevis, Antigua, Jamaica, Trinidad, etc. That led to universal adult suffrage, and then that led on the road to internal self-government, associated statehood as was known in St. Kitts and Nevis, and then later on independence. So we need to be aware, highlight more these aspects of how St. Kitts, not only St. Kitts Nevis is important for local knowledge, but also how St. Kitts and Nevis played a major role in influencing regional history. Because those revolts that led to labor laws being introduced not only in the Caribbean, but in the rest of the British Empire, those revolts started here in St. Kitts.
Yes.
Okay.
Global
and
impact.
largely inspired by the teachings of Marcus Garvey.
Yes.
So St. Kitts played a major role in shaping the history in terms of the political enfranchisement of working people, not only in the Caribbean, but in the rest of the British Empire.
And Dr. Gill, let's not also forget his admonition to own our land. And if I don't know if you could clarify for me if I'm wrong, but I would like to believe that if the MIS hall was packed to overflowing, that our owner, right, excellent, Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw would have perhaps also been present. And not to take anything away from his own contribution in any way or to diminish his own thoughts and philosophy as an individual himself and one of our stalwart national heroes, but it is perhaps through teachings, the teachings that he made that day, and what followed from that, why when attaining that kind of political power, that was one of the first decisions that were taken, that he would nationalize the crown lands that the black masses was completely locked out of obtaining prior to that. But you can clarify, Dr. Gale or Tony.
Well, I cannot say for sure whether or not Bradshaw was there when Garvey gave that speech, but obviously it is clear that Garvey's philosophies would have had an influence on our first political leaders who emerged in the 1930s and 40s, as well as other members of our intellectual class.
So I think that's a great segue into your question about the role that the MIS played.
Yes.
Well, I am not a historian, so I'll leave it to the historians. All I know from my understanding in terms of what I have read, and fortunately, when I went to the archive, they actually had a thesis that was done by a CFBC student on the Mutual Improvement Society.
Oh, nice.
And it's there I gleaned most of my information. And then there was also Mr. Larry Armani provided me with a speech that was done, well, a lecture that was delivered by our very own Sir Cuthbert Sebastian in the 90s when he addressed the society speaking about Robert Llewellyn Bradshaw's life and work. And in that speech, he spoke about how honored he was, where after many, many years, since he was a boy, one of his biggest ambitions was to be able to speak and address the MIS. And this was like a dream come true for him after many, many years. And the reverence in which he spoke of it, the respect of which he spoke of it, just shows the levels, you know. And I know that it started as mainly as a literary society where black men and women would come together and debate. And it was kind of an adult form of what the children do with the debate societies at both the high school and tertiary level. But it also was a space for cultural expression as well, you know, in terms of dances. And I think at one point, even in the 70s, the Akola Tegramantin practiced there. And this was just...
Akola Tegramantin practiced there up until the 1990s.
Yes. So I'll let you guys continue in terms of the significance and relevance. And then I want to just bring in one final point about whether or not, because something that has emerged from this conversation that we're having since Garvey's visit has been, would it be a good thing to perhaps bring back a society like that with a similar objective and mission to be able to contribute to the edification of our adult population? Because as we agreed, history had become an elective. Many people were not exposed. And how do we raise that awareness and understanding and impart that knowledge to the adult population who would have missed such an opportunity? And as the Roots of Enslaved Peoples Committee, we are committed to do our part in terms of contributing to these forms of edifying activities and to expose our citizens. Since early 2007 and thereon, we started the lecture series and would bring in certain people. We had Rex Nettleford here, we brought in Ashwa Kwesi and others, and we intend to continue with that work. But would we say as a country that this is perhaps something that we can look into in terms of some form? And we wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel because the Constitution is available, yes. That guided the MIS. It's there for us to see the building blocks of what put that together. So that's something
so
we
are
can
you
discuss.
envisioning a revival of the MIS rather than a whole new organization?
Yes, in terms of the mission and objectives, some sort of a forum even if it's not an organization that does other things in terms of advocacy and so on, but a forum that would allow for adult population to hone even their debate skills and discuss matters of history and politics and regional geopolitics and all of these things. So,
in fact,
yeah.
Our friend who spoke with Dr. Garvey on the flight out of here said that because that person was able to say that they had actually attended one of the last lectures that was given there, and they both bemoaned the fact that there isn't a forum like that anymore in St. Kitts and Nevis, and that it would be so useful. I'm a bit cynical, I've got to tell you, because especially from my days having worked at WinFM, I would cover all of these lectures. I would go, and it was sort of the same group of people who would attend. I mean, how do we get the masses involved? How do we get the interest of everyone? You know, when Marcus Garvey spoke here in 1937, he said in his speech, "I look around and I see people who look like me." It doesn't, I don't know if it is that we're not listeners, maybe we've become more visual. I just don't find that the next generation, and this is not a criticism, I'm actually concerned, they're not inclined to sit and listen to a speech. They just.
Well,
and how
I
do
would beg
we
to
get
differ.
there? Okay.
I'm not
You have to use for
the youth. Yes.
teacher. Of course there are, and there are young
There
people who
are.
are.
And it's,
But there are
they're
too
actually more
many.
than we think.
Yes, but there are too many who aren't. There are too many who don't enjoy reading, and they'll tell you.
But I
yeah.
don't know if that's is not because of a personal decision per se, but because our system has sort of failed our young people in terms
Perhaps.
of imparting this kinds
Yeah.
of knowledge.
I'm not
from
giving
young.
up. I'm not giving
Our
up.
parents, even in
Yeah.
terms of, even in terms of the stories we tell our children. I will give a quick example. In my studies, I was an international student. I studied abroad, and I encountered people from all over. And I remember I had this conversation with an Ethiopian friend of mine where it was something we were talking about, and I mentioned, this is when I did my master's in Vienna, when we were doing German, we were learning German, and in our German class, in our German class, the teacher was having us read Red Riding Hood in German, because it's actually a German story, Rotkapchen, right? It's a German bedtime story. I didn't even know that. And so she was like, what is this? I have never seen, what is this? And I'm like, you've never heard about Red Riding Hood? And she was like, no. And I said, you don't know anything about Beauty and the Beast and Cinderella and,
But that might have
the
been.
old woman in the shoe.
And you said she was from
Ethiopia. So that was the first
but
time
they
it
were
really
colonized
dawned
by
on
the
me.
Italians, though, weren't they?
Yeah, but they're still
Not colonized,
Ethiopian.
occupied.
Ethiopian.
No, I'm saying, but perhaps it's the British colonial influence that had us reading.
But that's
Grimm,
my point.
Grimm,
That
Hans
is my
Andersen, and
point. So
Grimm's
that
fairy
is how
tales.
pervasive and how deep this thing called colonialism goes, where even on a psychological level, think about it. I dabble in art, and I recall as a little child growing up, making my paper dolls and all of that, and doing my drawings of people. And when I think about it, the people that I drew were all long-haired. I never colored in the skin. I don't remember ever coloring in the skin with a brown. It always remained blank, like, white. And the hair was never curly or anything. Nothing that reflected me. So it just shows how insidious and deep and pervasive, even in terms of our own genetic code, in terms of what is passed on generation to generation. And we don't even recognize it. And that is why when Krumah can say he made us aware of our own degradation, it shows the level of conditioning, the depth of that, the extent of that, right? That you're being oppressed and somehow it feels right to you. It feels like you deserve. Because you just don't know anything different.
You're talking about coloring crayons.
Yeah.
The peachy color.
Yeah.
When I was using them, was called flesh. It was called flesh.
Yes. So true.
But before we did,
Even
Crayola
issues.
actually changed it to peach before I was even. And that's when Crayola changed it. I thought, oh yeah.
But even in our shoes as women,
Yeah.
when we want
Band-Aids.
it's called nude. It's called nude.
Yeah, but it's only a couple of years ago that Band-Aid started making a brown Band-Aid, and because we were told, they tried first with the see-through ones. They were trying a thing.
Even with ballerina shoes.
Ballerina shoes. Only about 10 years ago, they started making ballerina shoes in
So it just
brown.
shows the levels, And so that is why education has to be the driver of the next phase that we're moving into, I like to see our nation as a nation evolving almost in the same way a human being evolves,
Right.
We're moving into 42 years. The first few years we had to deal with nation building, creating state institutions like our national bank, Social Security, CHS, the housing authority.
But we're still
and all of those
celebrating Guy
things.
Fawkes.
Then we still had to, then we built on that and we created the first education revolution where the former Prime Minister would have said, every single household must have a university graduate. And I think now that we are at a level where we have relative well-being, that we can now think on the higher order things to do with who we are, what is our value system, what does being Kittitian and Nivision mean, what is our belief system, what is our worldview that we can say is distinctly Kittitian and Nivision,
worldview? What do we bring to the world? What do we offer as a people? And if it's an Afrocentric value system that we're basing on, what does that look like? Right?
And this is
Yes.
why I've invited you all here. You know, it's fine to be teaching in
Things what I do. When I- You just put the
Yeah.
three of us in
So
here
many-
one day and let us
right.
go crazy.
So many
Never
levels
mind, but
to
I'm
this.
thinking
So
that, you
many
know,
levels.
to expand the program, then you
Yes.
should probably think in terms of regular discussions on a stage, on
Well, maybe,
stations
maybe,
which have a
maybe the committee needs
much
to have a
wider
regular
outreach,
program,
you know.
like a
But Dr.
weekly
Gill,
or-
I know you have to leave shortly. Do you have any
didn't
other
realize-
thoughts? He
Oh,
left?
no.
Unfortunately.
Sorry, Dr. Gill.
Yes, he had to leave, unfortunately. He did have something to do.
But we do appreciate him being here, and of
Yes,
course,
yes.
and of course his input. He's my authority on all, well, actually all things, certainly archaeological. But he's
Yes.
done such in-depth study in that area in particular, and he was
Yes.
really fortunate that he was able to spend some time in Britain and going through some of those old colonial documents, and he found some incredible,
Yes,
like
yes.
transcripts of parliamentary sittings and things that happened here. You'd have to have him on to talk about it sometime. In regards to them wanting to put a U.S. Air Force base here and the likes of the Right Honourable Robert Bradshaw standing up and resisting that.
I can only
and-
imagine.
Oh,
I can only
it's just-
imagine.
it's
And
incredible the
he's
things
actually
that
our lead
happen.
expert with UNESCO working on the new tentative list.
Right, right.
Well, a tentative list for establishing a second UNESCO World Heritage
Yeah.
Site. And
The
we're
things
pleased
we
to
don't
say
even
that
know
we
about,
just
yeah.
we just secured another round of funding to fund the consultancy that would go into narrowing down and fleshing out a deeper case for the 4 sites that we're proposing. So we work very closely with Dr. Gill, and we really appreciate, I think the nation should express our appreciation for the tireless work that he does and continues to do. But back to the MIS. The original founding members, we have to remember, these weren't so-called learned men in the sense that, you know, they had a master's degree or PhD. They were school teachers. They were a couple of them, I think, were reverends in the church, members of the clergy, you know, and they saw this need and they stepped out and created the society and was able to attract to themselves people who, if not in that first generation, by the second generation, developed people like Sir Cuthbert Sebastian himself, right? And so it just shows how you have to start somewhere. We have to start somewhere. And when we had the youth forum, I'm always blown away. I'm always blown away when I sit with our young people, and I always feel so assured that our future is in good hands.
Secure, yes.
You
Oh,
know,
yes.
because we brought together Skanipa, we brought together 25 Remarkable Teens, we brought together Elevate Youth, we brought together some young people who had businesses, members of different social clubs like the Leo Club. It was an eclectic bunch who were there. And let me tell you, that was one of the most rigorous conversations that I engaged, and this is beyond even the lunches we would have had with other officials and so on, in terms of the passion that you saw, in terms of the curiosity that you saw. And Dr. Garvey was really in his element, and I think that is where he really relaxed and really uncovered a side of himself, where he spoke about his childhood. He spoke about what growing up in the Garvey household was like. One of the things he said was that growing up in the Garvey home, he didn't have cereal and with milk and those types of things. He was fed Garveyism morning, noon, and night. Everything was Garveyism. He said, I didn't have cereal and milk. I had a dose of Garvey every morning.
But it was Marcus Garvey who
Yes.
said, "Eat less, read more."
And he said, do not focus on your stomach, focus on feeding your
Your
mind.
mind,
Yeah.
And
yeah.
he said, control that stomach and feed your
Your
mind. So
mind,
he
yeah.
emphasized that a lot, right? And Dr. Garvey really brought that out. But what I loved about his presentation, and I think what really resonated with the youth, and I really was hoping one of our members could be with us here today, but unfortunately she couldn't, because she would have expounded a bit more from her perspective as a youth.
Yes.
But one of the key things that he spoke to was the importance of looking inward, and the importance of silence, and the importance of isolation. That in all the busyness, and that is one of the biggest challenges the next generation, this generation, next with technology and cell phones and the internet and social media and all of that. We discussed that. We talk about how, this thing called doom scrolling, where you can literally be on your phone and 6 hours pass with just scrolling, and you don't even realize that half of that time has passed.
Yeah.
And so he spoke about that in order to discover, in order to make an impact, you have to first discover who you are. And
That's
before
right.
you can discover who you are, you really have to take the time to look inward. And in order to look inward, you need to have those moments of silence. You need to have those moments of self-reflection and thinking through your choices on a daily basis and living consciously. That's the only other way I can put it. Where you are aware of the choices that you make and the consequences before you make them. And you as he said, you create your own reality. And one of the key phrases that is always going to stick with me is, he said, God provides the land, but man builds the cities. Yes.
Okay, we're going to
Okay.
take a commercial break then.
Yes.
WINN is 98.9. 98.9 is Win FM.
More than 42 million cars from 19 different car companies are being recalled for faulty airbag inflators. Repairs are fast, easy, and free. The problem isn't with the airbag, it's with the airbag inflator. Because the inflator can rupture, shooting shrapnel through the airbag, which can cause serious injury or even death. Don't risk it, fix it.
Please contact TDC Automotive Division to find out if your Toyota vehicle is affected by the Takata airbag recall. Visit or call us at 465-2511 in St. Kitts or 469-5430 in Nevis.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
People make the world go
So welcome back, listeners. And before we move on, I'd like to say that those young people, Sniper and Son, are good friends of WinFM. They used to come here very regularly and host a lot of programs. They recently approached me about coming back to do programs. And so I'm going to invite you all back to come and further the conversation also with them.
Well,
Yeah.
I like to give young people their space, to really.
Well, they will have their
give
space,
share
but
the
we also
perspective.
want to have a,
And-
yes, a balance.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
And it was really delightful because, as I said, Elevate Youth were also represented, and our young people are talented, and we have to know that what is common among all of us. Some of us, we've had to endure certain circumstances in life and have had to deal with certain issues through no fault a lot of the times of their
Yes.
own. But that does not negate the fact that our young people are aspirational, they're intelligent, they're talented. And the contributions that were made philosophically was done most by some of the members of that group in terms of really trying to extrapolate on some of what he was saying into real life conditions that we're facing. And he really went into that detail about us being co-creators with God and the importance of you really, as I said, living consciously in that way. And it was repeated again when he visited the prison, when he gave his address to the prisoners there, where he spoke about, the importance of taking ownership in terms of our choices, and to also impart that these four walls cannot bind you because your mind will always be free, and to make use of the time that you're here to elevate yourself in a way that when you re-enter society, you can emerge as a person who is more focused, a person who is more diligent, a person who can accomplish the things that he was gifted and created to be. We all have a purpose. Right. And that was the message that he also imparted. And it's also, it was a very rich experience on so many levels, and we really did try to make it as inclusive as possible to expose as many in our society to him as possible. And I really have to commend him, because at 92 years old, with the kind of schedule, and at no point, even before his arrival to when he arrived, did he ever complain or said, okay, I can't do this today, or I'm too tired for that today. He would have preferred to cancel a dinner with an official than to cancel any of those events.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And he, in all of his encounters, he gave his all. Right? And he never charged us speaking fees or anything for this visit. So he did all of this because it was coming from his heart.
What was the prisoner's response?
Well, I can't speak for them because they didn't really express, but based on the reactions and based on the expressions on the face, it's always a reflective moment. And it's something I experienced similarly when the Honorable Louis Farrakhan engaged them as well, where you saw the reflection. And I'm sure, it's always a little sad for me to see, because you can tell that, for some, that if they could have left, the prison the next day, they would have preferred that, because right there in that moment, they were ready to change.
Yeah.
Their lives. Yeah. And it's always sad to see that you have reflected in this way, but unfortunately your freedom is now limited. But and that is why I think he expressed that, you are not bound by the four walls around you, that you can free your mind and elevate, take the time to go to if there's a library, use the library, if there's access to internet, and edify yourself and prepare yourself for when you do emerge from this space, and you emerge a better person.
Okay,
Yes.
now we did promise that we would be opening the lines to our listeners at some point, so this is the point. Those of you who have questions or would like to make points, feel free to call. Okay.
Can I speak to some of what actually took place at Pump Bay? Why that ceremony was a little different from even
right
the
here
MIS?
to ask what is the whole significance to play. What was the celebration all about? Yes. So,
Yes.
Yeah.
So the remembrance ceremony took two parts. The first was at Pump Bay, where Garvey's ship landed, where we participated in what was called a port marker ceremony, which was a reverential homage to Marcus Garvey's landing and disembarkation right there on where he first touched down on Kittitian soil. In other spaces, port marker ceremonies are done for to remember the transatlantic slave trade and those ports where slavers would have landed and our ancestors would have disembarked.
But slavers did land there, though.
Well, that's true too.
Yeah.
But this time we were thinking of Garvey himself and
right.
his landing. And so the highlight of that ceremony was to lay wreaths on the sea to mark that moment. And it was almost like church.
It was reverent.
From beginning to
Some
end.
of us cried.
people were in tears because from the poetry that was sung, the drumming, and then after we unveiled the billboard, which is aspirational in terms of the Sandy Point community, led by the Sandy Point Heritage Society, would like to erect a monument and a small memorial park to Dr. Garvey to honor his arrival. Plus, the people of Sandy Point really claim him because he stayed in Sandy Point with Mr. McIntosh, who is actually the grandfather of Ambassador Jacinth Henry Martin, herself and her sister. So they claim him as their own. And so they, the community has expressed its desire to have a monument placed there on the hill, a little knoll overlooking the sea.
Which right now is covered with foliage, but it would be cleared. And
Yes. So they came up with a design plan created by Mr. Othniel Heiliger, and they agreed to as a committee, and it's something that they will put into a concept and do a costing for and present, not just to government as a key partner, but also, as we said, this is something that belongs to all of us. This is an epoch in our national history that resonated for all of us, and so it would take all of society to be able to, well, it should be involved in this, in terms of financing this project and so on, and being involved and being impacted by it. And so after we'd done that, and the officials and all of who were participating, and many people from the community came out, many persons came out, and we processed with the joint drumming corps of all the houses of Rastafari leading and chanting. And then when we got to the steps to go down into the sea, we had asked that a member of the community be the person to collect the wreaths from the Governor General
this
first.
was an elder, Rastafari elder.
Right. The Governor General first, the Prime Minister, and then Dr. Garvey himself. And the person who stepped forward to take that honor was Ras Nika, is my understanding, an elder. And the drummer started playing By the Rivers of Babylon.
Goosebumps,
And I think is that song, there was not a dry eye to be found. Because with the drumming and just the symbolism of this elder,
with which he held,
with his
wreaths,
gray hair and his locks
long
flowing,
gray locks.
and then he held
gosh.
up the wreath, and it was like
it was like church.
a Lion King
reverent.
moment,
Yes.
when he held up the wreaths. It was just so profound. I got goosebumps all over, and I just started crying. And when I looked around, there were a lot of people crying, and even Dr. Garvey himself, there were tears, and you could see he was emotional from even before, during the ceremony, before he spoke. And when he got up to give his brief exhortation, he actually said, you heard the crack in his voice, and you heard the tears when he said, this is actually an emotional experience for me because I am standing where my father stood, And so it was, when I say it was very profound on such a deeply spiritual level.
I can well imagine.
Yes.
And you can view it online.
Yes.
Well, how is a quick way? Because, the link is long, but what should they...
It's on SKNIS.
Right.
So
if you go to the
live stream
YouTube
link, you click on that, and it goes directly to
so if
the
you
YouTube,
go to the
and that's
YouTube,
there for posterity.
And so the Pump Bay is a separate link from Market Street,
Market
which is
Street.
also
Yes.
was some amazing presentations,
Yes, and then by
including
the time
that
we
by
got
Dr. Garvey.
to the MIS, we were welcomed by another section of that drumming corps, and initially when we spoke with Dr. Garvey, we essentially gave him scope to make it his own, but the emphasis was more on his father's speech, where it was like, as many excerpts from it as possible. We want you to speak about the speech. But as time went by and he participated in the immersion heritage experience and got to see the rich historical and cultural heritage of St. Kitts, I think a lot of that stayed with him. And when he engaged with government officials and so on, and he, understood, even the political implications, the geopolitical implications, you could get a sense that he had some thoughts of his own. And so when we discussed it the night before, I could see that he was going to make it his own. And so when he got up to speak, it was like Marcus Garvey's speech 2.0 because it drew inspiration from his father's speech. But he went to some degree even deeper into that the mechanics of that internal reflection process that we all need to understand to really emancipate our minds, to become who we were sent here to be, and to disrupt the status quo, and to dismantle systems that were not designed in our favor. And I think coming...
Which still exists.
Yeah, and I think coming as it did, even in a space like Market Street, as you know, we've had some challenges in terms of, gang violence and so on. For that message to resonate, about the importance of individual responsibility, the importance of seeing yourself as part of something, to see yourself as one people who have emerged from this traumatic experience, but emerged triumphant. So we're not victims here, right? And to when he, when he spoke to the systems that we've inherited, like for instance, that's what resonated more with me, because I do a lot of work also, in my daily mentoring with young people, and a lot of young people who are going through challenges, and I know that to some degree, the gang culture, it glorifies violence. It glorifies gangsterism. And even this old idea of the ghetto, right?
It becomes an identity.
It becomes
blend,
like an identity. It becomes something to be proud of to some degree, right? It has been valorized in that way, but in some way. And I don't know if a lot of people understand even the origin of that word ghetto. When you studied the etymology, I don't even know if etymology is the word. The word ghetto, when it was first used, was, I think, either in the 1700s in a space in Italy that was run by a tyrant, and then it was used most by Hitler during World War II, during the Third Reich. And ghettos were the inner city spaces that were created to corral the Jews, to prepare them for that long trip to the gas chamber. So a ghetto, and it is the same meaning that in its first expression in Italy, where it's a place that a people are taken to be corralled, to prepare them for their extermination. And we really need to let that sink in when we valorize these terms and we relate to it as if it's something positive in any way. And what we have to acknowledge that we should not embrace anything or any concept that was created for our extermination. And if you look at what has taken place in the US especially, because a lot of what we are doing here in terms of how our own young people are interpreted is based on influences out of the United States and the gang culture in LA and New York and all of that. And that is exactly why those ghettos were created, because as the former slaves from the South migrated north especially, in order to control these populations, they were pushed into the inner city, essentially corralled, right? And then there was a systemic agenda to make sure that in that space they would pump in drugs, there's a liquor store in every corner, poor schools, all of this, because it was designed for our extermination. Because even though the government couldn't, legalize, a program to literally exterminate in the way that Hitler did, where it was a mass extermination program that was done to the point of 6 million Jews were killed, systematically killed on an industrial level. They couldn't do that in America. So what they did, they put us in a space where they would inject all of the things to cause us to turn against ourselves. Right?
And then turn around and say they did it to themselves.
Exactly. And so we have to and that is why we have to emancipate our minds. And that is why I felt that the moment has come for us to remember Garvey's teachings. Remember who we
Yes.
are. Remember we are all brothers and sisters. Remember we are all on this small little boat in the world floating around
Yes.
called St. Kitts and Nevis. And I just want to end, because I don't want to ramble on and on. I want to give everybody else a chance to speak. But what it reminds me of in terms of how I see our nation right now is like the scene. I don't know if everyone has watched Gladiator 2.
No, I only saw
You
the
haven't
first
watched
one.
Gladiator 2? Well, there's a scene in Gladiator 2 where the gladiators are in the Colosseum, but they're on ships. Because the Colosseum has been filled with water, because part 2 has to be even more epic than the part 1. So they had a scene where they're fighting, but they're on ships. The Colosseum has been filled with water. The biggest, nastiest sharks you can find are in that water, right? And then you have the battle of whatever side, which would be, I guess, the Roman army against the gladiators, but on ships. And the main character is the leader who is giving the instructions. And what you see is, if they didn't row together in the same direction, follow the orders and instructions of the leader, and row together to maneuver themselves in preparation for ramming and all that they did to be able to emerge from that situation victorious, right? They would have all died. And we have to start seeing ourselves as a nation that we are all in this small boat together, and we have to row together. And if we don't row together and we start all of us, imagine all of us rowing in all kinds of different directions, where is that going to lead us, right? Because we're in a hostile world. We're in a world, as I said, that's still suffering the challenges of systemic racism and all of these things. We're in a world that is riddled with conflict in a lot of ways. And if we are going to survive and thrive in this kind of environment, we have to row together. We have to work with our leaders. Nobody is saying we can't challenge our leaders, but do it in a constructive way to understand that you're part of creating the solution to whatever our challenges are.
So true.
And you hold the people in leadership accountable for these things. However, at the end of the day, we're all in this together. And the planning for this series of events couldn't have been possible if we didn't. It was a completely collaborative, because our committee has no budget. So we started off with this ambitious plan with $0, knowing that the right people will find us, because it is something that we know people would see as good and a relevant thing to do. And it is because of that collaboration that we're able to execute this with the level of precision and level of excellence that it was at. I mean, the defense forces, the security forces, foreign affairs, protocolary services, everybody, the Nevis Island administration, everybody was involved in planning this. Mm-hmm. And by the time the day came around, it was literally military precision. I can't think of one thing that went wrong. Right. One glitch that took place. It was just perfection. And that was because we all worked together. And it's yet another demonstration of how much we can accomplish as a country if we all rowed in the same direction.
Right, right.
I think though that we have to give credit to the ambassador, because the people who were on the committee, those who were, and it was a large committee, and it was a diverse committee.
Because we combined, we extended our committee to include a national stakeholders, from foreign affairs, police, defense, all over, NIA, everybody, and we brought everybody together to plan it.
And I think and every person had that individual passion. We have a WhatsApp chat. I actually wasn't even able to attend meetings until quite late because, of obligations with school and so on. But it wasn't, we weren't just talking about this project and ongoing projects of the committee, but anything that was relevant or interesting, any sort of bigger. So Carla at the time was, she was working on her reparatory justice thesis. She'd find an interesting article and she'd share it because she knew that the people on this committee would be interested. And then we'd have these little discussions. So within, even though we had our remit, if you will, the interest of every member of that committee was the big picture. And so we were all able to have, we had conversations every day.
It's the power of community.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is the power of community. And I was happy when the Honorable Marsha Henderson spoke to the principle of Ubuntu and how that even influenced her approach to building out the community tourism product as part of the overarching venture deeper that she's doing, and how it would take all of us to invest. Even the site of the MIS, I think it's now transitioning in terms of ownership, and where I believe the National Trust might soon be taking ownership of it. But it is something that the entire community need to take interest in terms of its maintenance. We all have a role to play, I should say, and it is my hope moving forward that with the property being clean, that everybody in the community would be minded towards ensuring its upkeep, and not just leave it to government alone, but to make sure that they understand that this is hallowed ground, not just in terms of Marcus Garvey, but our own ancestors who started this for this purpose. And this demonstrates that we are a community of champions, and we should all make sure that it is given the due respect and care that it deserves moving forward. And the maintenance of our historical places and sites of memory belongs to all of us. Some of it is in private hands. Some, it's not all owned by government entities. And so we all should know and understand. But it comes with education as well. It comes with education to know what are the historic buildings around Bastille. What are those that speak to our colonial heritage, and what are those that speak to our own people who emerged as leaders and, cultural icons and sports people, and give honor and, to them as well. And so I hope moving forward that this represents, we turn a page in terms of improving how we currently relate to our places and sites of memory. And I must really also commend Nevis, because Nevis to me has done an amazing job with their heritage sites in terms of the maintenance there. And the experience there was equally, profound for Dr. Garvey as well.
What happened there?
Well, we were hosted by the NIA under the leadership of Premier Mark Brantley, and his chief of protocol made all of the arrangements for the tour. She was present on the tour. And Mr. Leonard Stapleton came over from St. Kitts, and he conducted that tour there because he knows on both islands. He knows he's our guru. Yes. On all matters by and heritage and culture. And we were hosted to a delightful lunch at Golden Rock Estate by the Premier and his wife, and we had a very rigorous debate and discussion about all topics, even geopolitics and politics, and it was a very enriching and unforgettable experience. And I think that the Premier has expressed as much on his
and so
social
has Dr. Garvey himself, in this private conversation.
Yes.
Made a point of saying how
Yes.
much he enjoyed his time in Nevis as well.
And then he, on the day of the remembrance ceremony, he was hosted to lunch by Mr. Arthur Sharp and his wife and the Prime Minister. And that was another rich and deep discussion, because I don't know if many people are aware that the Prime Minister himself is a lover of history and a very avid reader. And to see the engagement between two medical doctors, firstly.
Oh, yes, of course.
Some of the conversation was around health and the body and maintaining the body and so on, and giving Mr. Sharp some advice on certain and even
getting all up in Mr. Sharp's.
But also, they went into a very deep conversation around Garveyism, the Caribbean intellectuals who congregated in universities all across England and France, who spoke with who would become the leaders of African countries, and being able to, from the coming together of those students, George Padmore, like CLR James, all these people, they studied together, Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere and all of them, was able to spawn the first World Congress of the Organization for African Unity. right? So the Caribbean has always played that role, and that was one of the points that the Prime Minister raised in terms of leading the charge on these discussions in relation to Pan-Africanism. It wasn't something that we just inherited or inculcated from the continent. We were leading on that conversation. And in his speech that he gave at the MIS building, he actually spoke to Marcus Garvey's prophecy, where he foresaw a day where the Caribbean will play that pivotal role in what he called uniting a scattered race and creating an empire, an African century on whose sun shall never set, right? So it would be good to go back and listen to the Prime Minister's speech as well.
Yes.
And
yes.
I think the Prime Minister also acknowledged the profound nature of Dr. Garvey's speech in terms of him inserting himself. And he has asked us to transcribe his speech because he said that in itself, he said, you went even deeper than your father.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And he would like that transcribed to be shared along with his father's speech for people's edification.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yes.
Well, I'm sure that, once that has been transcribed, we'll get it up on our website and so on, so that people can
Yes.
have access.
And of course, you can share the audio as well.
That's right.
That's pretty
Yeah.
easy
Yeah.
to pull that
Yeah.
out too. Yes, I can stay back and do it for you if you'd like, Lorraine. I still have some skills.
Okay.
Okay, we're going to take a break now and we'll be back.
We're different. We're 98.9. 98.9. Win FM.
Ready to save while you build? Now you can at Builders Paradise. Yes, shoppers, build up your Value Club points at Builders Paradise. That's right, Value Club members and shoppers, your favorite frequent buyer club is now available at the home of hardware and more. Whether you're laying tiles, painting walls, replacing doors, upgrading windows, or fixing up your home, every purchase at Builders Paradise now earns you Value Club points. Enjoy exclusive benefits like discounts on thousands of items, special savings for seniors, instant deals, quarterly rebates, plus an extra up to 2% off every quarter. Shop more, save more, earn more, only at Builders Paradise. Don't miss out. Start building your rewards today with Value Club at Builders Paradise, because every bolt, board, and brush brings you closer to bigger, better savings. Terms and conditions apply.
Maybe it's the way the brilliant gold liquid reflects our sunshine, or how the bright blue of its label mirrors the clear Caribbean skies overhead. Maybe it's the fresh, crisp taste of this beastly cold beer on a scorching hot day. Maybe it's even the way it brings us all together. But one thing is for sure, Carib is very much a part of who we are wherever we're from in the Caribbean. Carib, it's the way we play. Drink responsibly.
People make the world go
Well, from what I've been hearing, this sounds to have been quite an experience at every level. And so this might be a strange question, but I'm going to ask each of you to let us know what you think is the high point, the highest point of this remarkable experience.
Well, I will talk in terms of what I think for the nation, and then my own personal high point. I thought the Pump Bay ceremony, and in particular the wreath laying, it just, in terms of reverence and emotion, and I thought that was I thought that was pivotal. I thought it was definitely a high point, not in any way to minimize what MIS, where we had the speeches, these the Honourable Prime Minister and Dr. Garvey, tremendous speeches, but in terms of how you felt in your,
It was visceral.
Yeah,
almost
that's it.
Primitive.
Yeah, absolutely.
deep.
It was. Yeah, absolutely. It was a primal. It was it was an innate thing. Visceral is the word. Yes. So I think that was a highlight, but certainly the public events, very much so. And I hope that people who weren't able to, and you know, there was the event at the circus on his last day here as well with the Rastafari movement. I would hope that people who didn't get the opportunity to be there would still take the opportunity and listen. And the ceremonies were not long. You know, it's not until sometimes you think, boy, am I going to go back and sit and listen to a whole... The ceremonies themselves are about an hour, and everybody's presentation, nobody spoke for more than, 10 minutes, or less, some even less. So this is not any huge commitment. And of course, once you start listening, you're going to get drawn in anyway.
Yes.
On a personal level, I'd been asked by the committee we were able to present some of our historical documents to Dr. Garvey at the Prime Minister's office just before he met with Cabinet. And these are some pieces that we're really fortunate to still have. The state still owns. So, the Register of Slaves, that's actually what it's called. I don't like the word, but it's called a Register of Slaves. And essentially it was an inventory, if you will, of every enslaved person who lived on St. Kitts. Just St. Kitts, each island had to do its own in 1817, so 10 years after they stopped the trade itself with Africa. Only 5 of the actual documents still exist today, have survived, and ours is one of the 5. And I think most of the others, other than one, is Jamaica, Dominica, Belize, Tobago, and ours. And most of the others are in private collection. So we own that document. And it has in the names of every single enslaved person who lived on the island at the time, and this is almost 22,000 people.
Wow.
Their name, the estate they lived on, their proprietor or the person who claimed ownership, their age, their skin color, so what shade of black we were, the work we did on the estate, and where we were born, which is also very interesting. Most were born in St. Kitts, but we do have people in that register who were born in Africa. So this is one of the documents we still have, over 200 years old. We still have in our possession the actual document that officially ended enslavement. The Act for the Abolition of Slavery was passed in Great Britain in 1833 to come into effect on the 1st of August 1834, but each colony was required to pass their own version. St. Kitts was the first to pass theirs, and it was in July of 1834, and it came into effect on the 1st. So that actual, we call it the Emancipation Act. Officially, the law is called the Act for the Abolition of Slavery. And it's written out in a book. There's a book of laws. Every time they passed a law in the Parliament, in the Assembly, it would get written out by hand. Everything was handwritten. So it's just in the book with all the other laws that came before and after, right about in the middle. And there it is. For me, that reading those words and understanding what they meant, and by the way, our people didn't take it lying down. Everybody thinks that Emancipation Day was, hey, glory, and we all celebrating. Not in St. Kitts, but that for another time. We didn't take it lying down, this whole apprenticeship business, that document. And then we spoke earlier of the Masters and Servants Act. We had that. We had copies of newspaper coverage of the time, contemporary newspapers. It would have been the same bulletin.
The publication of his full speech in the Union Messenger.
In the Union Messenger, and then of Buckley's, the Buckley's Uprising. That was a difficult read because, you know, these journalists, to them, I think they spoke about the workers and their unreasonable demands. I mean, my back went up, right? But that was how it was written about back then. So these are actual original documents that are normally in a vault, you know, under lock and key, and you know, as best as we can, try to control the climate that we had on exhibit. And then during my time at the museum, I had the honor, the archivist actually had lent us these documents to put on exhibit. So I knew a little thing or two about them. And so Neri said, no, you got to come and present. I said, but all those stairs, you all know me, my bad ankles, right? So I started making those stairs earlier.
Photo, because that smile.
I went early to get
Yes,
up
so we got her up
these
these
flights of
stairs.
stairs.
Saw the picture with her and Dr. Garvey?
Oh,
Yes,
I can't even
beautiful.
look at the picture. I look like a mad woman.
No,
Anyhow,
good.
but anyway, I was up those stairs and I got to sit down and cool off and powder my brow. And I was waiting for when he arrived. And he was just so unassuming and warm. And whatever fear you had of engaging him one-on-one just melted away. And I just got caught up in it. And as you said, the Prime Minister is there and he's nodding away because he's into this stuff, right?
Yes.
And it was brief, but in the moment it just felt like forever. And then suddenly it was over. So for me personally, that was my, not just highlight, but a peak life experience for me.
I can imagine.
But
yes.
overall, there were so many high points. But I would say the public events, because the most amount of people were exposed to those. And so in terms of the impact, I would say
Yes.
those would have been
And
highlights.
we really would have liked to have a public event on Nevis as well, but Culturama.
Oh,
You
yeah.
see, because his visit was circumscribed by the fact that he was in the region already on the invitation of the Antigua and Barbuda National Reparations Commission.
Right.
So they had their Emancipation Day activities, and part of that was a night watch where they rung in Emancipation Day. So they had a night of exhortation and culture and poetry and all of that. And so he was invited to speak at that event. And so Mr. Hanley, who is our national, who works with him, he used the opportunity to synchronize that with a visit here, because he'd always been telling him, you need to come to St. Kitts. So we piggybacked on that visit. So that event was on the July 30th.
30,
And the
31st,
first,
right.
and then he had 1 day to rest, and then he flew over on the 3rd. So unfortunately, it coincided with Culturama
Yeah.
and a holiday as well, which made it a little bit difficult, because as much as we would have liked a public event, the consensus was, who's going to come? Who's going to leave Culturama and come to a lecture or come to, you see? So that was why that decision was taken, and we limited it to the tour and the sit-down lunch with the premier, which we were happy and are grateful for him hosting him in such a magnificent way. So that is what kind of conspired against us being able to do a similar public event with Nevis. But the invitation was sent, and I believe circulated on their government information program as well, and to their media as well, which would have allowed time for persons to come over to St. Kitts to experience the remembrance ceremony itself. And we did have representation from the Nevis Heritage and Cultural Society, Miss Isabel Byron. She attended both events on both sides. No, I don't think she was at the Pump Bay. She attended the MIS ceremony. So there was very much a presence there in relation to that. The president of the National Trust was also present for St. Christopher National Trust. And he also participated in the tour of St. Kitts. And as I said, so many stakeholders, because that tour, the final stop was Brimstone Hill, and His Excellency Calvin St. Just, the head of the CBI program, he hosted us for lunch at the new Gastro Lounge restaurant. For not just him, it wasn't a private lunch, it was for all who participated in the tour. About 15 persons who would have participated in that lunch. So just to show the level of stakeholder interest,
Yes.
because when we reached out about potentially hosting, immediately he said this aligns very much with the work of the CBI program, because fundamental to it is national development. Fundamental to it is us being self-reliant and self-sufficient as a country in terms of funding our own development and not having to go cap in hand like so many other nations to the IMF and to the World Bank and all these spaces, but where we can be the drivers of our own development and not have to owe anybody, not have to deal with any unreasonable conditionalities, which we know because there's an agenda behind it, is really meant for our continued subjugation and so he immediately, you know, embraced that as an opportunity, and he himself was touched by that experience with engaging Dr. Garvey one-on-one as well. So as I said, broad cross-section of people were involved in this, broad cross-section, and I'm grateful to them all. But for me, the most profound, I can't get Nika out of my mind. I don't know, he just his look, he reminded me of
He looked like a black
an
Moses.
Aborigine chief, you know.
Let me tell you, he had his long locks and this
Just
beautiful.
he just looked like this
beautiful
elder spiritual, like he embodied, you know, it was
with him on SKNIS.
Yeah, he was just like the embodiment of the ancestors' presence.
And during the ceremony, he was standing on the side.
And
we didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know who he was at that time earlier on.
Yeah.
But my cousin and I, Dr. Ferdinand, were sitting together, actually were mesmerized, and we took pictures of the man.
Oh my
we didn't know. We just said, no, but we have to capture this. Look at this man. So without knowing who the role he was about to play in the ceremony, he had already caught our attention.
Yes, and he was wearing his Garvey shirt.
But he was wearing his, he was wearing
his Garvey shirt.
I saw a lot of Garvey shirts with it.
Yeah, so that stands out for me, and I know it moved. I don't know, his presence just was, as I said, it was like that it was iconic. You know, it was so symbolic of the ancestral presence.
Yeah.
You know, with him being an elder.
Yeah.
You know, an elder Rastafari. You know, let me tell you why I have so much respect for the Rastafarian community, and I could be totally wrong. Maybe I'm really extrapolating this beyond and interpreting too much into it. But I remember at one lecture with Sir Hilary Beckles. As you know, he's the Chancellor for UE and the chair of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, and he gave a lecture here when we had a conference, the Roots of Enslaved Peoples Committee. We had that conference on reparations in 2015, and one of the things he talked about was that when during the slave trade, when they were taking captives, onto the ships. Yes, onto the ships. He said, did you know that there were people who volunteered themselves to be captured? He said, often the shamans of the tribe, where they would have had the raid or whatever, even though they may not have been captured, they would either insert themselves into the line or they would travel behind them to be there when they were making that transition from whatever slave castle onto the ships, because they knew that our people would need them. Without that spiritual connection is no way, and I get emotional, I'm getting emotional just thinking about, there is no way that our people would be able to mentally cope with what was awaiting them on the other side. And so they maintained, they volunteered themselves into slavery in order to be there for the people. And somehow I just feel like the spirit of those shamans lives on in our Rastafari community, because they have been the ones holding the torch on all these decades, constantly reminding us to remember our history, remember the philosophy, remember who we are, remember. And I don't really subscribe to reincarnation, but if it was one thing that makes me want to consider it as real, it's really their presence, because they just embody that shamanic, spirit, and so I have tremendous respect. And when I see their presence, I give homage to that spirit, that mantle, again, that's on them, right? They serve a vital role in our community, and we can't thank them enough, for this, and hopefully moving forward with our young people learning our history, and that it will become widespread in terms of this knowledge and this passion and this respect that we have for our own history. So that was iconic for me. And then the MIS location, when he went among the masquerades and he took that other iconic photo standing in the middle of the masquerades. I don't know if you've seen it, with them surrounding him.
Yeah. SKNS website, Facebook page, yes, they're wonderful photos there.
I did see that.
Yes.
Yeah, so for both the speeches, for both the ceremonies, and amazing photographs of the entire trip, you can check out the SKNS Facebook page.
Yes. Wonderful. Well, yes, I think so. I mean, I must thank both of you tremendously for coming in here this morning, as well as Dr. Gill. Yes, I found it a very interesting discussion. I mean, I like Quint, I really don't know too much about this history. This is quite a session, and I believe that maybe our callers didn't call because they didn't want to disturb the process, and they were, caught up in what is being revealed to us all. And as I said before, I'm going to invite you all back so that we can continue, to discuss other important issues like this, to the benefit of all of us.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yes. Yes.
As Quintessential has said, especially
That's
St.
right.
Kitts and
That's
Nevis
right.
history.
What? Yes.
We have such a rich and incredible history, and it's not a history of just trauma. It is a history of triumph. One of the things that came up in our discussion, and I'm going to be brief.
The caller waited.
Hello.
Is that what she said? I didn't want to interrupt you.
I thought we were wrapping. Sorry, go ahead.
We were, but
Yes.
we can't.
Sure.
Good afternoon, caller.
Yes.
Eternal love and greetings.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Eternal joy and love to the royal African, royal mothers of creation. And blessed love of the African people. We ain't coming here with no petition and division, the African people. But we give thanks for the program today. We just like to emphasize something that we need to really rely on the aspect. Our story is not entailed by European. Our story is entailed by African heritage. And we must able to bring that awareness to our young youth them at this moment, while we're going to last the status quo where we are building, saying that sustainable island growth state, the way that we are seeing the world said that is trying to bring forth a value of rights and justice. We're still seeing a lot of missing. So we are calling upon these nations and our people, in particular the education system. Let us start making our narrative be real and not be something that can make up. Because in a make up we're making up here. We have a true vital story that is value for the youth them to align with. Well, we can always have that European aspect breaking down the value that we need. Give thanks.
Thank you.
And Rasaya is also a member of our Roots of Enslaved Peoples Committee, as well as Ras Kalonji, Ras Iroy. And I think we have a new inductee in Mr. Otis Jeffers, a farmer from Keon, who volunteered for this event. But he's really emphasizing the right thing, And I just look forward to more conversations like this, as you said. We have to find a way, as I said, moving forward to engage adults as well somehow.
Yes.
We have it with our lecture series, and we have decided as a committee that we are going to take our lecture series to a new level. We are creating what we call the inaugural Umoja Pan-African Dialogues, where it goes beyond just a lecture. It is impartation in terms of our thought leaders and intellectuals, but it is more interactive and engaging of our people at the very grassroots level and allow us to hear from them as well. What are their thoughts about where the region is heading in terms of, strengthening and deepening cooperation with Africa? What are the thoughts of our private sector personnel, our Chamber of Commerce, our business people in terms of exploring commercial ties, how it should be done, what pace it should be done at, what are the countries that we should focus our attention to in terms of strengthening those ties that would be beneficial. We need to also be part of that conversation. Right now, a lot of what's being discussed is happening at the summitry level among heads of government, but we need to bring it down to the people, and we need to unpack it to deal with all of the different thematic dimensions of what this will entail in order for it to become a reality in a way that resonates with our people. Because, a lot of the times regional integration, for instance, is criticized as being a paperless, people-less process. A paper-based, I should say, people-less process is because of, I think there is a disconnect because enough isn't being done at the communications level to get our people to buy in to the goals, the reason, the rationale, the raison d'etre of why we're doing this and and for them to see themselves in it in terms of how they benefit on all levels, spiritually, emotionally, economically, socially, right? And so we don't want, this pivot to Africa just to fall into the same routine. From its inception, it should be one that includes the masses in the conversation and be sectoral and multidisciplinary in its approach.
Very good.
Yes. So my last words would be: let's not forget, as a nation, let's row together. We're all in one small ship, in a hostile space, shark-infested waters all around, many people firing all kinds of arrows and spears at us, and would be happy to see us fail so they can come and take what we have.
That's right.
Because what we have, Garvey already said, is a Garden of Eden. And if we think there are people out there waiting for us to drop the ball so they can take it from us, we need to think again.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I think that's a great way to end today's program. Am I right? Yes. I thank you again.
Okay, we're getting.
Sure.
All right, we've already gone over.
Well, thank you, caller. Can we hear what you have to say?
Hello,
Yeah,
caller. Hi.
Yeah, good day. I was trying to catch you all before you go off, man. Good day for you two ladies.
Good day.
Good day.
Yeah. Somewhere along the line, right, I heard that the history is going to be changed in the curriculum in the schools. Is that correct?
We're creating a course on St. Kitts Nevis Studies, yes, on national history, capturing that. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so my question is, will the Rastafarians who has been, the pioneers of pushing for the history to be changed, will they be included in any of the discussions? Mm-hmm. And this, the reason why I'm asking this question is I heard a popular caller mention this on one of the other radio stations. And, I just want to know if the Rastafarians going to be included in any discussions, and who is really going to vet the history as we change it to match our history instead of his story. And great show, and thanks for Marcus Garvey's son for making that appearance in the Federation. And great show today. Thanks a lot, the ladies. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you, caller.
Welcome. I can say this much because I wasn't part of the initial process, but my understanding is some stakeholder consultation was done then. But certainly, in terms of the peer review process, once that curriculum is developed, the intention is to bring together people who are national treasures and icons and have that understanding. So the idea of embracing Rastafari in this process, it's not foreign to government. They have been consulted on many things, and I don't see why in this area they would not. I can't speak for the authorities, but I don't see why they would not include them in that peer review process. So we look forward to that. And now that you've even made it clear as a recommendation, this is something that we can put forward as a recommendation that they do.
And just to let the caller know as well, because this is a St. Kitts Nevis studies, this is in addition to the CXC Caribbean history syllabus, which does include a section on Rastafarianism in the theme of social life in the Caribbean. It looks at things like the role of Rastafarianism, the birth, the growth, the role of Rastafarianism, music as well, food, the different cultures of the people who would have come after emancipation. Cricket, it even looks at the role of cricket in our development and in our feelings of nationalism and how West Indies cricket, there was a time when that brought the region together. So absolutely, Rastafarianism is included in even the Caribbean history syllabus, but for our local St. Kitts and Nevis studies, I would certainly like to see that our local Rastafarian movement is included in that as well.
Definitely there's potential here. And I just want to make the distinction because, as you said, it's offered in CSEC. But the problem is that it became an elective after, I think, third form.
But that is
right?
that seems to be based different. It's different schools, which means it's not being dictated by the Ministry of Education. Because here in St. Kitts, there are schools that have decided it's going to be an elective. So if it is to be compulsory,
that is what it seeks to correct.
Right.
To some
If
degree,
it seeks
that
to be
those who are not
compulsory, I still want to just throw him a little word to advocate at the Ministry of Education that somebody looks at this. If all that we're saying means something, then we have to look at putting Caribbean history as back, because it used to be back as a compulsory subject. Simply because we don't live in isolation, and you have to understand the context in which our history, the history of St. Kitts and Nevis was born and grew and developed, why and how, and those interactions and the influences from other parts of the Caribbean and so on. So I think it's very important, and I hope that they will consider that.
Yes, and it was a decision I think came down from the CARICOM heads level. And
they
I
were the
always
ones
thought
who
that
said,
it was a
leave it up
very
to the schools.
Misguided decision to make, because can you think of the prospect one day of having a prime minister who has never done history in terms of
and
what
doesn't
that
know
means
and doesn't
in
know
terms of his or her leadership?
Yep.
You see, so I don't, I think whatever decision, whatever process guided that decision, it was.
But I still think at the local level,
So
we are a sovereign
Yes.
nation, and we can make our own decisions about our school curriculum, curricula.
Certainly. And the idea of it being a decolonized history is going to be decolonized not just in terms of content and the focus, but also in terms of how we teach it, the methodology that we use, the pedagogy that we use. And Mr. Stapleton, for instance, he devised something called the rooted approach, where it's a character building focus in terms of how do we apply the different events and so on that took place, and to apply it to solving problems. What does it teach us in terms of, like, for instance, our ancestors who built Brimstone Hill? What does that teach us in terms of the work ethic that they demonstrated, the level of skill that we can be proud of and be confident and take pride in? So as I said, that we don't see it as slavery as just this negative, traumatic thing, but we see ourselves as emerging victors over it. We have triumphed over it. We are all here because our ancestors triumphed and survived. Right?
But that's how I teach history.
Right,
but
exactly.
Again, there isn't a standardized way of imparting the information.
Right.
Teachers find different ways to engage. That's my way.
My
way is to constantly relate it to something in the now.
Yes.
And the future. But that's a conversation for another time.
Yes.
And with that, we really have to close. I really would like to say sincere thank you to both of you and Dr. Gill. Obviously, the visit of Dr. Garvey has reopened or opened the eyes sorry, of many on this very important conversation, which is obviously only just now beginning. And so, therefore, I will be calling on you, as well as the youngsters, to come and let us continue the conversation, this very important conversation over time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We're different. We're 98.9. 98.9. Win FM.
More than 42 million cars from 19 different car companies are being recalled for faulty airbag inflators. Repairs are fast, easy, and free. The problem isn't with the airbag, it's with the airbag